We wolfed down the forbidden fruit like Oliver Twist with a bowl full of Fruit Loops. That didn't surprise him either, but I'm sure it saddened him. Knowing what was going to happen, he already had a remedy ready, an antidote for the poison we had so eagerly consumed. He would divest himself of his glory, enter our history as a mortal man, and offer himself up as a sacrifice. And through the sacrifice, we could again become God's companions, readmitted to his fellowship, just like Adam was before he chose to walk out on God. But the remedy, the Redeemer, didn't just waltz into the garden that afternoon and make everything swell again. It would be some time before he physically made his appearance. God wanted to re-establish a bond of trust with his companions first. So what was the first thing he did? He uttered prophecies to all of the participants in the first sin.
Yahweh said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all of the cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your lives. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise his heel."
By tempting the first humans to doubt Yahweh's word, Satan had made himself God's mortal enemy. So Yahweh informs us that a descendant of these same humans, and specifically of the woman, would ultimately be his undoing.
To the woman he said, "I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you."
Yahweh had created the man and the woman as equal partners, but the woman would, due to her key role in the first sin, henceforth be ruled by her husband, and women from that day forward would be frustrated in their desire to wield the authority that men held. Women's rights activists must blame Eve, not Adam, and certainly not Yahweh, for the injustice they find in the world. But the man didn't get off scot-free.
Then to Adam he said, "Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and you have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, You shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all of the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return." Genesis 3:14-20.
The close, intimate fellowship that Adam had enjoyed with his Creator had been broken. His sin had separated him from God, and as a result, he had become mortal. His body would now grow old and die. 3 players, 3 predictions. Prophecy principle number 1, pay attention to the object of the prophecy. God said something different to the serpent, to Adam, and to Eve. Determining who the prophecy is about will keep us from jumping to erroneous conclusions. Sometimes. It's not always easy to tell who the subject is. For example, in the passages about Satan quoted above, Isaiah had begun by speaking out against the king of Babylon. In Ezekiel's tirade, the prophet was hammering the prince of Tyre. In each case, God shifted the subject in mid-prophecy. Earthly kings were used as metaphors for Satan. We need to stay on our toes. Only God knows the future because He alone exists independent of time. And He, from the very beginning, has shown a willingness to tell us what's coming. Why, then, don't most of us know what to expect? Why do we worry, fret, plan, and scheme? Why do we hedge our bets, compromising with the world system we know is flawed and corrupt? It's because we don't appreciate deep down inside that our Creator God actually is in control. A few examples will serve to demonstrate that a solid faith backed with a knowledge of prophecy could give us a degree of peace most of us never experience.
He took the 12 aside and said to them, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he will be delivered to the Gentiles, and will be mocked and insulted and spit upon. They will scourge him and kill him. And the third day he will rise again. But they understood none of these things. This saying was hidden from them, and they did not know the things which were spoken. Luke 18:31-34.
If we knew what God had planned, if we really understood where we were in God's grand scheme, we wouldn't sweat the small stuff. We would cheerfully declare with Paul,
For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Philippians 1:21.
On a practical level, correctly applying biblical prophecies to our lives can save us from unnecessary pain. Joshua warned Jerusalem,
If you had known, even you, especially in this your day, the things that make for your peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Luke 19:41-44.
By the time Titus besieged the city in 70 A.D., thousands of Christians familiar with this prophecy had already left town. Those who stayed died or were enslaved. As if to make my point for me, Paul writes,
Now all these things,
that is, Israel's misfortunes in the wilderness,
happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. 1 Corinthians 10:11.
If we study to learn the mindset of God and familiarize ourselves with His prophetic plan, we will be in a position to live according to His will in a sinful world. Avoiding the coming wrath, we too can get out of Jerusalem before the Romans show up, if we know what God has predicted. The study of prophecies that have already been fulfilled can go a long way toward correcting the misconception that this world is out of control. Beyond that, they will tell us a great deal about how Yahweh intends to bring about His prophecies that have not yet come to pass, which, after all, is the subject of this book. Prophecy principle number 2, Yahweh doesn't change. He is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Thus, if we can determine how His prophecies were fulfilled in the past, we will be in a better position to predict how they will be fulfilled in the future. Though His ways are higher than our ways, though His judgments are unsearchable and His methods past finding out, the fact remains that He went to a great deal of trouble to see to it that we had information, and lots of it, that described our future. It's there for a reason. It's there because He loves us. When He said we were supposed to comfort one another with these words, what words was He talking about? They were words of prophecy. I mentioned how psychics and prognosticators can achieve fame and fortune by guessing correctly some of the time. God's prophets were held to a slightly stiffer standard.
But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, How shall we know the word which Yahweh has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of Yahweh, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which Yahweh has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him. Deuteronomy 18:20-22.
The flip side of this truth was stated by Jeremiah.
When the word of the prophet comes to pass, the prophet will be known as one whom Yahweh has truly sent. Jeremiah 28:9.
In fact, Yahweh works both sides of the street, vindicating the words of His true prophets when their prognostications come to pass, while confounding the false prophets who presume to speak their own mind in His name.
Thus says Yahweh, your Redeemer, and He who formed you from the womb. I am Yahweh, who makes all things, who stretches out the heavens all alone, who spreads abroad the earth by myself, who frustrates the signs of the babblers, who drives diviners mad, who turns wise men backward, and who makes their knowledge foolishness, who confirms the word of His servant, and who performs the counsel of His messengers. Isaiah 44:24-26.
John put it like this:
For I testify to everyone who hears the words of this prophecy of this book, if anyone adds to these things, God will add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of this book of prophecy, God shall take away his part from the book of life, from the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. Revelation 22:18 and 19.
Okay, got it. 1, don't attribute false doctrine to Yahweh, which is, by the way, the real meaning of the third commandment. 2, don't ascribe deity to false gods. 3, don't add to or subtract from His revelation. And 4, don't deny the truth of God's words, or you're toast. Now you know why I'm so careful about putting the real thing in a separate voice. My ramblings may help you understand what God meant, but don't confuse what I say with Scripture. Consider what else Moses said.
The secret things belong to Yahweh our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may do the works of this law. Deuteronomy 29:29.
Moses realized that Yahweh didn't tell us everything. Our feeble minds couldn't handle the strain. We are on a need-to-know basis. What He did tell us, He told us for a reason. All the words of this law boils down to this, if I'm not mistaken.
Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Deuteronomy 6:4, Leviticus 19:18.
Joshua insisted that all of the law, or instructions, and the prophets hung on these two interrelated concepts. Did you catch the connection? God reveals things to us so that we might love Him, or more to the point, return His love. Being called as a prophet of God had its downside, beside the obvious problem of getting stoned, in the literal sense, if you announced something that God didn't actually reveal. The sad fact was that God's message was often unpopular, especially among the ruling elite. Some things never change. And since they often didn't know the one who had sent the bad news, they attacked the messenger instead. Joshua himself pointed this out to the scribes and Pharisees of his day in his own meek and gentle way.
Serpents, broods of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? Therefore, indeed, I send you prophets, wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that on you might come all of the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Assuredly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Matthew 23:33-36, also Luke 11:49-51.
He sure had a way with words. Murder had been a time-honored way of silencing the truth from the first generation onward. The Zechariah he speaks of here was not the prophet, but the father of John the Baptist. Joshua's prediction, by the way, was filled within that generation, less than 40 years later, when Titus tore Jerusalem apart stone by stone. Prophets as a class had it rough. Jeremiah preached for 40 years. Nobody listened. They finally threw him in a cesspool. Isaiah had a long and illustrious career, capped, legend has it, by getting himself sawn in two.